buonasera, signore e signori, buonasera. Thank you very much for being with us. So, as you understand, the talk tonight will be in English. This is the third one of the series, and I would like to just start by thanking the Italian Cultural Institute and Dottoressa Iafrate and her wonderful team for making this possible. This is actually a joint effort between the institute itself, maybe you know it, and the rIICerca. And I would like also to thank our two speakers for tonight, Professor Reina and Professor Carletti, that you will have the pleasure to know in a few minutes. Regarding the association, the rIICerca, we have a mission of promoting the cultural, let's say, in the cultural scene of Belgium, the work of Italian researchers here, abroad, in this case in Belgium, and to promote the networking among, well, say the Italian community, but also with the Belgian community, and promote their work, the work that they do here. And I think that this series of events is really fulfilling all these three main points of our mission. Tonight we will talk about, so the title, maybe you know it already, is the mathematics of opinion spreading in social networks. And let me introduce your first guest for tonight, which is Professor Timoteo Carletti. So he earned his doctoral degree in Florence and at the Institut de Mécanique Céleste de Calcul des Éphémérides in Paris. Then he started joining different labs in, let's say, around Europe, again in Paris, then Scuola Normale di Pisa, University of Padua, University of Venice, and finally joining in Belgium in 2005 and becoming professor in 2008 and full professor in 2011. And then from 2011 he founded the Institute for the Namur Center for Complex System, and then became president of, as well of the graduate school FNRS complex in the period between 2011 and 2017. And his area of research covers dynamical system, chaos theory, numerical method, of course, as a mathematician, and complex theory in general. So join me in welcoming Professor Carletti. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Thank you to the organizer for having us today. And thank you all of you to be there to listen to us. So yeah, I'm Timoteo Carletti, and I work in the Department of Mathematics at University of Namur in the Complex System Institute. So if you don't know what the complex system is, I found very amazing that this definition over there. It says here, the light, as all the stuff in the world, is composed by many small pieces, heterogeneous among them, but the whole quality can be seen as a whole. So I didn't know it was there, but it's the definition of complex system, so it's really what the kind of thing that I work with every day. So today with Giovanni we present you some ideas of the mathematics behind the opinion spread in social networks, and we split in two parts the presentation as usual. I will present the first part, is more introduction. I give you some ideas, some general topics, and then Giovanni will present some examples, and the idea will be a continuous thread between mathematics, robotics, and animals, in particular bees and ants, just to spoil your result. And okay, so let me start. This one? Yeah, okay. So I will start with this that I call the wheel of research. It's a circular wheel or triangular one, if you want, that you can run in both directions. And I think this is the basis of any kind of science. The idea is that you start from some real phenomenon from which you observe, and then you can measure, you can obtain some data from this phenomenon. It can be any phenomenon, physical one, chemical one. Today will be opinion, say social phenomenon. Then once you have enough data, you can pass to the models. So the models is the part where mathematics enters for the first time, and the idea is that starting from some a priori background, you build a model. A model, I will be back in a while, is not necessarily an equation. And once you have a model, then again the mathematics enters, and you do an analysis of the model. It can be proving something, so a theorem, but it can be making numerical simulation of the theory of the model. And the idea is that once you have the analytical part, you have to produce, to check if the model is good with respect to the data that you have, and then you have to benchmark the models over the data. So it can be calibration at the beginning, but then the idea is that with analysis you can try to push the model to create a new kind of result, and then you have to check with the data. If not, so if the data that you produce with the analysis does not fit with the data, there are two possibilities. First of all, your model is wrong. This is quite often. Or the data is not precise enough. This means that you are predicting something that is not already known experimentally. And then you have to go back to the experimenters and say them, okay, make a better machine, because I'm predicting this and you didn't observe it, so there's something wrong. Of course, it may also the problem where you did the wrong analysis, but this we hope we can handle with the mathematics behind. So the idea is that you have to really circle around this kind of triangle or wheel and try to feed each part each other. Of course, I put in 3 different parts, but they're not divided nor temporally nor logically. Once you have data, you're already thinking of the model, you're also already thinking of which kind of analysis you can do, which kind of prediction you can do. So it's really 3 pieces of the same stuff. Okay? So now I will start with the data, then I will pass to the model, and I will really slightly introduce analysis because it's the part that Giovanni will develop. So to start with the data, I took an example, which it's not a joke, but a very simple example of something that can be studied with the opinion dynamics. So every day we receive in our mailbox a lot of unwanted mail. I think everybody can check this every day. So how do you name this unwanted mail? Spam? Something else? Junk? Good? Spam, junk? Okay, junk we can understand. Junk because it's junk. Why spam? Do you know why spam? Okay, so I give you a sketch of Monty Python. I hope you can listen to it. So this is in principle the origin of the main spam.
Morning. Morning. What you got then? Well, there's egg and bacon.
So they are ordering to
sausage
eat.
and bacon. Egg and spam. Egg, bacon and spam. Egg, bacon, sausage and spam. Spam, bacon, sausage and spam. Spam, egg, spam, spam, bacon and spam. Spam, 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 egg and spam. Spam, spam, spam.
So
spam,
it goes
spam,
for 2
spam,
minutes. So
egg,
I
bean, spam,
skip the rest
spam,
part.
spam, and spam.
So, but then I just took a snapshot of the menu, and so you can see there is a spam, 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 spam. What is spam? Indeed, spam is something. Is the pork, is the meat pork sold in a can. So you can open the can and eat. But the point is that nobody wants it, but you want to sell to everybody. So that is the spam. So the mail that you receive, nobody wants it, but you receive nevertheless. So everybody is obliged to accept the spam. Okay? So this is the initial point. And so you say that there is this spam and junk. And so why there are 2 names for the same stuff? And so this is quite often. Once you have a new idea or new object or new something, you have to decide the name for this. And of course, the names are sometimes very simple to find the name for something, but sometimes they are not so simple. So what I did here, so here's the data part. I asked to Google, so Google has this website, trendsgoogle.com, where you can ask to Google the relative number of searches that people did in, I think this is the 2004 up to date. So in the last 20 years, Google has stored somewhere all the queries that we did. So imagine, all in the world. So here I asked to Google to provide me every time that someone in the US or with the IP from the US looked for the mail spam or mail junk, red and blue. And you see that in the US, they see this 2004, 2010, 17. So there is a lot of queries about mail junk, and then they go down, it's below there is mail spam. Why I put here Italy just to compare, and this is almost the opposite. The people ask more for spam than junk. But this doesn't mean that in the US they prefer junk, in Italy we prefer spam. It's just how often people look for. But this is important because this means that people hesitate on the name to use, or maybe they don't know, they are used to call it spam, but someone told them, oh no, this is junk. Then they are looking. So this is just the frequency of the data. So this is something that is very interesting for us because from Google, we can extract all this kind of data. You can look there for everything you want. You put the query, and it returns you the most, if you look, for instance, I don't know, gift, we have all the pics for Christmas, Easter, and so on. If you put another name that they call something periodic in the year, so summer, you look beaches and so on, we have all the pics in summer. So this is a very good experiment for us to look to what people look for or queries in Google. We could have used something like Twitter also. Twitter is a social media where you put a message, a short message, and then you retweet, so people diffuse your idea or your message. There is only positive, there is not negative feedback on Twitter, because you can only retweet the tweet to someone else. And then again, by looking for initial person that tweets something or the person that retweet this message, you can have access or the spread on this idea, or you can do something similar with the Facebook with the like. At a point there was also the dislike, but then that's been removed. So there are all kind of platforms, social platforms, that can be used to get some data over which we can do some experiment. So this idea of experiment, so this is a kind of a junk spam, as a name, is called naming game. It really means the game, so they determine the name of something. And Giovanni will tell us something more at the end. But this can also be thought as how social norms do emerge. So why there are social norms in some countries that are not the same in another? Because people automatically, without any imposition, without someone that imposes from above that you should call it junk or spam, or you have to wear this stuff or not. So this kind of self-emerging properties are what we are interested in today. So just to make a long story short, today is junk that won according to Thunderbird. This is my Thunderbird pages, the settings. You see that you can read junk setting, junk. But if you look carefully, if you look at the software that decides automatically if a mail is a junk or spam, is called spam. This is because this kind of software has been written in the period where the spam was the winning word. So the spam assassin is the most used one, but this spam mail, and so on. So this is to show you that it's not the final word. So maybe at some time spam will emerge, or maybe there is a junk that will invade all the population. Nobody will remember spam in the following. There are also other names that scam also that emerges for some times, and so. So this is the idea. So this is a question. The problem is that you have a thing that you want to say, which is his name, and then there is people that discuss, try to fix the name of this idea, because then when I want you to tell you this is an unwanted mail, I use junk or spam. I want to be sure that you understand what I'm saying. Okay. Okay. So now that we have the data, let me pass to the model part. Okay, the model part, let me go in that way. So first of all, what is a model? So a model is a representation of reality. Of course, it's not a reality, but it's a representation. And a model needs to contain enough information to reproduce the data that, for instance, I'm discussing. I'm used to tell to my students the following example. When I was a teenager and then I went with my parents on holidays, I used to see my father and my mother taking this map, the pieces of paper maps where we have cities, streets, and so on. A map, a geographical map, is not a reality, it's a model. It's a model of reality, because you can find enough information to go, say, from Florence to Rome, but you cannot find everything inside the map. So it's a representation. Today we think that with our smartphone, the Google Map is the reality. It's not. You can zoom, at some point it stops. It also depends from which kind of information Google put inside. Okay? So the model is really a representation of reality. Then there are several information that you can put in a model. For instance, I have some colleague from the vet department for whom a sheep is a model, because it's a model of an animal. So they want to understand how the animals can get sick or not. And then they have animals that are models, so they are representation of the standard sheep that they have. Or you can take, so if I take this kind of stuff and I draw it, I can exactly know where it will land at which time. And to do this, I do not need the relativity, nor the fact that there is the sun or the moon nearby. Even if I know that the real world is with relativity, and I know that the sun is around, I attract everything. But why? Because if I throw this, I can neglect the rest of the relativity of the sun. On the other hand, if I would like to throw a satellite, I cannot forget the fact that there is the relativity and the fact that there is the sun, because they will be the main point. So the idea is that once you have a model, you have to put inside enough information, but not too much to be overwhelmed by the information that you add inside. And so this is really a tricky part, but in some sense the role of the mathematician is something like an artist. You have to imagine what you want to put inside, and then only go back to the data and analysis to understand if what you put inside is good or not. So for that reason, the following sentence that for many people can be a shame is actually the way we work every day. So all the models are wrong because they are only a representation of reality. They are not the reality. So this is important fact. But for us, what is important, so for us, say, mathematicians or people from science, that some are useful. Because I know that I can ask to a model to provide something, but cannot ask everything to a model. And so this is really the way, so this is like motive of science. You have a model which is true today, because according to the data that we have, you can prove that the model is true. But if tomorrow someone arrives with another experience that contradicts the model, no problem. I have to adjust the model and increase my knowledge. This is what happened in physics since several centuries, where at the beginning the Earth was at the center of the universe, then it was the sun, and then the Earth turned around, and then we know this is not enough, you have also to add relativity, and then general relativity, and so on. Everything is already running. You cannot stop, you can never stop once you have a model. You can only improve the model, forget the past, and go to where you want to go. So what really is important is that point here, so that you have to put in the model the stuff that are enough to explain what you want to explain. So no more, no less. So if I go back to my example of junk and spam, there are at least 3 main ingredients that I have to put in my model. So my model here is, I would like to explain how people in US or Europe decide at some point that the good name for unwanted mail is junk and not mail and not spam. Okay. So the first ingredient is myself. So the person have to decide how to call an unwanted mail. Do I call it junk or do I call it spam? Of course, this is not enough, but let me do a small parenthesis here. For what I want to do, myself or the person that I'm interested in is a black box. So I only interested in the fact that he receives some information, he does some computation, and he ejects some output. So I don't want to, or at least I'm not interested here in understanding the way he perceives things, the way he perceives the reality, and so on. So I'm not here interested in the psychology part, even if it will be a model in its own to understand how a person interacts with the environment. So here, really, myself is a simple in-out black box. Of course, the second part is the social network, because all the queries that I did or people did in the US in the last 20 years are define, if you want, a social network, because those persons also interact in other ways, not just looking on Google. And then this is an important point, because you have your idea, but then you look what is around you, and looking around you, you can change your idea. Okay. And the last point is exactly the interaction. So how do I change my mind because I spoke or I interact with someone in the social network? Okay, so I think there are the 3 main ingredients that you cannot remove unless you have some empty model that you cannot explain anything. Of course, you can make stuff more and more complex. I say just complexify myself, complexify the interaction rules, complexify the social network. Okay, but already with this simple scheme, you can imagine there are several ways, for instance, of the interaction rules. So think of you want to go to a restaurant. You know very well the what kind of restaurant do you have here, close to this place? So what you can do, you can ask to your friends or to your neighborhood, but you can ask in several ways. You can make you can ask to all your friends, suppose that it can be instantaneously, but then you will have the good, say, a very, say, optimal result in some sense, if you all agree on the same taste, that because you average all the possibilities, at the end, someone will provide, say, the majority say, okay, the restaurant here on the street is the best one according to us, at least the majority. Okay? But this is a possible way, but you understand that the cognitive load of this decision is very heavy because you have to interact with, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 persons, and then you have to understand they vote in some sense, and then you have to decide the majority. So this is called the majority model in the jargon, but it's a way proceeding. So I ask to everybody there, which is the best restaurant over there. We vote with the left side, and then they will decide for majority. There's a way to do it, but it's not maybe the best one. Another possibility is that I pick at random one of my friends, and I ask, which is your best restaurant, and I accept your proposition. Of course, they will be very fast, no computational load because I just ask one person, but the probability to get errors, or if you want not best restaurant, is very high because maybe the person that I ask doesn't know anything about, or maybe is biased. So maybe I can end up with fast food instead of very good restaurant nearby. So there are two extremes where you only have two possibilities, say junk and mail, junk and spam, and you ask, do you use junk or spam? You can go for majority, I can go for each person, but you understand that the second way is also very slow, because if I want to have more information, I cannot stop at the first person that I pick at random. I have to ask the second, the third, the fourth, and so on. So this will take time. So you have to compromise in between time and cognitive load. And Giovanni will explain this after, how you can handle this point. Of course, you can have intermediate models where you not just make one person of the major or all the word. So sorry, the one with one person is called voter model. So if I ask one person, it will be voter model, and Giovanni will use this word, or this majority model, where of course is the majority. So I say you can have intermediate situation where you ask 3 persons, 4 persons, and so on. So you can imagine all this kind of information. But then you can also complexify myself, in the sense that I will not enter in my head, but you can think that there are persons that will never change advice. So again, I ask you junk or spam, say majority or voter mode, doesn't matter. Say spam is the winning word, but I decided junk because I want to jump. So there are people, they are say zealot, so they never change their mind because they think that their mind is the right one. So if you have this kind of behavior in the group, of course you are moving the social network toward direction, because if a lot of persons never change their mind, each time they interact with the other, at some point they start to diffuse their way of thinking. Or there are persons that are contrarians. So you say junk, and then I say spam. You say spam, and then I say junk. So I go on the opposite of the majority. There are several reasons for this. I don't know now which can be used in case of junk or spam, but you can have myself or the person that interact with the person, accept the rule, but then by the word that he took for itself is the contrary of the decision. So of course, you already understand that there are several interaction rules, a very simple one, but can modify the outcome of the model. That's what is the light is at the beginning, is a very simple rules, very simple entities, if we can think that they ourselves are simple, but then the emerging behavior is really because of the social network that take everything together. So this is the idea of this kind of models. So I use several times the word networks. So let me give you a few examples of a network. So a network is just, so I told you social network, so a network is just a lot of nodes in the jargon that are person in this case, that are connected by a line here, called also edge, if they share something. So if it is my Facebook network, this is myself, all the lines are my friends. If it is the Twitter networks, this is myself in my tweet, if you want. These are the person that retweet my tweet, and so on. So you can construct with this idea of network this kind of data. So I show you just 3 examples, which are the main important ones. So this is the random. So this is very easy. You take two nodes, with some probability, you add the link. So you throw a dice, or you throw a head and tails, and if it's a head, you put a link or not. So this is a very ground model. It just, once you do know much about the population of the social network, you just do it by random. A more interesting one, closer to the reality, is the scale-free network, also called preferential attachment. Here, the idea is the following. You have to think that the network is not static, but it evolves in time. Every time a new node enters, so a new person enters in the world, then he decides to connect to one of the already existing nodes. Which one? A good strategy is to go toward the one that already has a large number of friends. So if you have a new person arriving in a job or in a city, and you want to go with someone and you ask where to go, but you go to the person that up to you, because there is all the noise. Up to you is the one that is more central. There are a lot of friends, because then you can have a feedback on this. And so if you construct a network that way, each time a node arrives, you connect to the one that they have already a larger degrees, what is called the number of neighborhoods. Then you have this preferential attachment, and then at the end, the network will have few nodes called hubs, like the hubs of the airport, that are connected to many nodes, and there are a lot of nodes, called this one, that are connected with only one or two persons. This is a good representation of reality. There are persons that have only, say, one or two friends, that are schematized there, and the other persons that are very centered, that have a lot of friends. Or if you look in your Facebook, this is a quite common distribution of friends in Facebook. Another example is this one. It's called a small world. Here, the construction is a bit more, it's not complicated, but a bit strange. So you take an initial network where everybody has the same number of neighborhoods, and then with some probability, you decide to take off one link and put aside. So you rewire the link, as you say. At the end, you find a network. It's called a small world. And the interesting part of this network is that if you pick at random two nodes everywhere, they are very close to each other. So the idea is that if you take two persons on this network, then the number of friends that separate one from the other is very small. Okay? This is something that maybe you already heard of. It's called the 6 degree of separation. There has been a movie. There is an experiment done in the 50s, I think, the last century, by Milgram, who studied the number of steps that a letter have to perform to pass from the East Coast to the West Coast in the U.S. So U.S. is 300 million of inhabitants, but the number of steps is only 6 or 7. So in 6 or 7 steps, a person can reach one from one coast to the other without knowing, of course, each other, because there is only one step, in only 6 steps. So this is quite amazing, and this is, again, a good representation of social network. In social network, if you take two persons at random, they are related by the very short amount of intermediate steps. Almost finished. So now we did the data, models, and now analysis. So on the analysis, I will leave the floor to Giovanni. I would like only to make point the solely fact that I spoke mostly of humans, so beings of decide what to use, junk or spam. But what Giovanni will show you is that is almost the same thing that studying humans or studying robots or ants and bees, because the social rules that are behind this kind of models are very similar, and indeed you can use a robot to understand how people behave or how animals behave. Okay, with this I finish. 24 minutes on time, so I give the floor to you.
So thank you very much. Our next guest and speaker is Professor Reina, graduated in computer engineering from Politecnico di Milano, and a PhD from Université Libre de Bruxelles here in Belgium. She's been a research fellow at University of Sheffield in the UK for 5 years, from 2015 to 2020. And then is currently employed as a research fellow here and chargé de recherche from FNRS, that's the fund scheme. And well, his main research interests are very interdisciplinary, so from robotics to computer science, physics, cognitive psychology. That's all needed to treat this kind of complex problem. So welcome, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. thanks for the introduction and for the invitation and for organizing this nice event. So I will continue the story on this opinion spreading, and as Timoteo already spoiled, I will change a bit the model organism that will not be exactly anymore humans, but in fact opinions spread also in animals group, because animals as well as us need to coordinate and reach an agreement on some convention. They also need to coordinate their action. For example, when or where go to forage, when to flee from a danger, or where to build their nest. And so also here each animal, each individual of a group might have different opinions, and they will need to spread this opinion in the population, convince the other that what they found is the best, or being convinced that actually their idea wasn't so good, and to change. And this opinion spreading can be modeled, as we have seen, in various ways, and these models can be also very useful to design robots, group of robots that again coordinate their actions. So when we have several robots that are autonomously operating in the world, they might need to decide where is the safest place to build a construction, a bridge, to cross a river, for example, or to coordinate in time. When is the best moment to, for example, drop water on a fire to maximize their ability to extinguish the fire? Or how to split among the group among different tasks. Some do some operations, some others, or move together in a direction. Here's some example of where coordination is necessary, as also in this group of robots. So I will now change a bit what Timoteo said, in saying that there are two important ingredients, but they will cover actually the three ingredients that showed Timoteo, and is indeed the individual behavior. So the two ingredients that I find important are what each individual does. So how does one use the information from other, how you store your opinion, or animals store their opinion, and how they combine contradicting information. I believe one thing and the other believe a different one. And the other one, as said, is the social network. Who speaks with whom? So how I share my information, and who is in contact with which other individual. As we have seen, there are different types of networks, different type of connection. And so in today's speech, I will explain you this, I will go into the details of these two with some example on animals and on robots. So let's start from the first ingredient, the individual behavior. And I'll give you an example through the individual behavior of an ant on how the colony makes the decision, and what's the behavior of the ant in making this decision. And so the ant lives in groups. They are really a social animal that they aggregate in groups of thousands of individuals, and they coordinate their action throughout all their day. But one thing that they sometimes do when their nest is, for example, ruined, flooded, or maybe it's just not very good to accommodate the growing population, they want to relocate. They need to choose their next home to move on and build a new nest. So ants will explore the environment, and at random might find one possible suitable location, and will select it as his own preferred opinion. So this blue ant has the opinion that the good place to move is this tiny blue house, and will return to the group and will spread this opinion by advertising it. And how this spreading of opinion is advertised is done by the so-called tandem run. So here is our blue, which one? This is the blue ant that returned and is convincing another one to go to the blue house. So he's showing the way where to go, and the blue ant is spreading the opinion to the second ant that this is a good location to go. Though some other ant might explore other parts of the environment and finding a mansion much better than the tiny blue house, and so might commit with another opinion, return, and spread it again in the group. But this time, because what she discovered is much better, will advertise more vividly, more intensively. So this difference in advertising one or the other opinion will lead the group to reach a consensus for either option. So we can, so this information will spread more in case the ants will advertise it more, and so this will lead to a consensus, as we'll see later in my next slide. But one thing is that we can, again, build a model of this behavior, as Timoteo said. This has been observed by the biologists, so this is the data, and so they can represent this with the possible state that the ant has, and what they built is the so-called voter model. And so this ant that doesn't have an opinion, if he speaks, he receives the signal from a blue ant, will have this blue opinion, and if he interacts with a red ant, will become an ant with a red opinion. And then if the blue ant speaks with, again, one other that believes the same, remains convinced about the blue, but if he meets an ant that believes is better the red location, will change its opinion. And the same happens for the other state. And so we have this change of opinion that if we combine it with a voting, a spreading of the opinion proportional to the quality, will lead the group to select the best option. So if one is better than the other, will be voted more frequently, and we will have a consensus decision. What does it mean? It means that all the swarm, the colony, will relocate to the best option. However, if there are some stubborn in the group, the one that mentioned before, for example, Timoteo, or if the two places have a similar quality, what happens is that the group will remain undecided. We all know some of this type of individuals that don't want to listen and they remain on their options, so it's reasonable that this might also happen in ants, that there will be individual stubborn. Or it also happens that there are two similar locations. And that decision deadlock will lead the group to split. And this can be dangerous because the group needs to be cohesive, because they only have normally one queen ant that is the organism dedicated to the reproduction, and so they can't afford this splitting. Luckily, the ants usually they don't travel far. As you have seen, these ants communicate with this tandem run and move back and forth. So when this situation happens, that can happen quite frequently, after a few days they find each other again and they relocate happily all in one place. However, there are other organisms, other animals, in specific the bees, that cannot afford this splitting, because they don't stay around a few meters, a few from the original nest, but they explore vast areas of kilometers, and then it's hard to re-find back the splitted nest and rejoin. So here the decision of the new nest, this opinion spreading, happens in spring, when the colony reproduces and the old queen leaves the nest, goes to a temporary place together with thousands of other scout bees. And these scout bees needs to make a collective decision quickly. And because they are exposed to danger from predator and from weather. And so they, again, they exchange, they explore the environment, find possible suitable nest, and then they exchange opinion on where is the best location to go. As I said here, they don't do this tandem run lasting few meters, but they use another way of signaling to each other. So that is the Woggle dance. So here there is this spreading of opinion happens through this dance in which they shake their bum and move in an 8 shape, indicating the direction and the distance where to fly to find the suitable nest. So, except the fact of changing this way of communicating, they also change how the interaction happens. So, well, first of all, there are no ants, but there are bees. And, well, the main important change is that when a blue bee meets a red bee, it doesn't change directly. But what happens is that these bees return to a uncommitted state. So it's a kind of negative feedback. This is a positive feedback, and they evolved a new signaling that is based on, no, sorry, you are thinking wrong, you think blue, but I think red, please stop advertising this option. And this is a small change. You may wonder, well, what's the matter? Looks the same. But this tiny change in a simple model will really lead to completely different dynamics, as we will see very soon. And this is the cross inhibition model. And I will explain you what led to this difference thanks to an example that I conducted using robots. These are very tiny robots, very simple robots, are tiny robots that can move on a flat surface through vibration motors. And they can communicate with each other through infrared lights. So they bounce an infrared message on the ground, and they communicate in the close proximity of about 10 centimeters. So this robot can communicate this robot nearby, but the blue one cannot hear this one. So why having this simple tiny robot is they are big like a €2 coin? Well, having these tiny robots allow university and research lab to afford large group of them and study how information, for example, how opinions spread in large populations. So what we did is to test the two models we have seen before, the model of the bee, the ants, that they change directly their opinion, and the bee with this negative feedback added. And we coded this behavior inside each of these robots and see the results. So here we have, well, this study has been done in collaboration with my student Raina Zakir and my collaborator Marco Dorigo. And here what we do is to study the difference between these two models in the presence of 20% of stubborns, these guys that don't listen, that we all know and we don't like. And we can see that when we include some of these stubborn in the system with the voter model, that was the one using the ant, I should have put a little ant here, remains undecided over time. Here is the quantity of blue and red robots, and they cannot agree if it's better the blue or red house. Instead, with this cross inhibition, this little change, we see that rapidly one of the two options is selected, and it remains constantly chosen throughout the experiment. And this is even clearer if we add only 4, here I call them zealot, but are those stubborn that don't listen at others. And so 4 stubborn, 2 in each side, is sufficient to keep the system continuously undecided. Here, for a while, they reach an agreement on the blue, but this is quickly changed over throughout the experiment. So the agreement is never stable and keeps flipping. So that is something that for example, in the example we had, the bee cannot afford, because if they would split, they would the whole colony would die. So they evolved a mechanism to change a bit their interaction and having this negative feedback. So using this model, we have this decision deadlock in which we cannot reach an agreement. And here, instead, with this tiny change, we have this group consensus. So here I make a point that the behavior can be quite counterintuitive. Is what Timoteo tried to explain, that even if the rules are pretty simple, the collective behavior can be surprising. Here, by letting the individual robot or the individual insect be undecided, so return to be undecided rather than keeping its decision, allows the swarm to make a consensus, to reach a consensus. Okay, so this gave you an idea of some of the individual behavior that we can observe, but these were too simple behavior. I can cover really rapidly a few other examples to have an idea of which model, which type of behavior we can use in our opinion dynamics research. For example, here in the ants and in the bees, the opinion were binary. So either the bee believed that the red or the blue house was the best, but it could also happen on a continuum. For example, on this continuum, you could have a value between 0 and 1 of how much you believe one or the other option is good, and this could represent a political decision or a item that you prefer more than the other, or a word that you use more than the other. So this makes the model more complex, and then also the dynamics more complex. And then you might also have rules that defines that you only speak with people up, I am on this side, and I have a threshold. I don't never interact with people that are on the far spectrum. And this will lead really to global dynamics completely different if you add these tiny rules like segregation or echo chamber, that the network will not interact anymore with each other and the system will be polarized. Or when the social information is used, for example, in the example of the insect, we see what is called the simple contagion. So one ant advertising a location was sufficient to convince another individual. But research on fish, and I think is also what happens with people, show that the contagion is more complex. Complex means that you need more than one individual to change your opinion. For example, the other day I was in a meeting, scientific meeting, and they suggested me to use this software, Midjourney, to create fancy images. Now there are so many softwares, so I didn't really follow it. But then yesterday I was on the bus and I heard the two people next to me again saying, Midjourney is great. They were speaking between each other. And so having this second confirmation of an independent source saying the same opinion, this evening I'll go home and I'll check Midjourney, how it is. So this is another way of having more complicated model. But to move forward, I will give you now an example on the impact of the social network. So who speaks with whom, and what's the impact of having different social networks in the opinion spreading. And this work has been done in collaboration with these people, Salat Al-Amali, Aridan Sai, James Marshall, while I was in Sheffield. And here we were working with a robotic application, and our idea was again to have this robot exchange information on an area that needed more attention than the other. So here they needed to agree on which was the most urgent area on which the ground worker should have acted. But what if a new dangerous area arrives, or there is a new important site that needs attention? So that is what we say as dynamic environment. The group has agreed that this is the most urgent area, but something even more important appeared. Is the group able to change its opinion? Can the opinion about a new things can spread in the population? So, as experimental setup, we use again our friends, the kilobot, these tiny robots, and we augmented them with some cameras, extra light to have this area, this site visible to the robot that here are overlaid on the image. And so there is one side that is more important than the other. So, as I said, we have a static situation in which the blue is the most important site, and the group agreed that the blue is the most important. What happens when they are all blue, or they all believe blue is the most urgent, and a new area appears? So my student Salah, excellent guy, made all this system in which he showed that when a new area of interest appear, all the group is able to converge to the new site. If this area disappear, the group is able to change its opinion and return to the blue state, so everything worked really nicely. And when we swap the quality of the blue and the green, again the group was able to adapt. So we were pretty happy with these results, but then towards the end, Salah arrived in my office and said, Giovanni, we have a problem. I said, what's going on? So when we have the small communication range of the robot, everything is fine, but when we have a large communication, the things don't work anymore. What does it mean, this range? So we have our robots, and each robot speaks with the robots in the neighborhood, right? So means that we can build a network. This robot will speak with this one, and every robot has its own range of interaction. So this robot speaks with this other one, and so on. Every robot has a few connections. But when we have a large communication, the network, so the same robot in the same position, but with a large communication range, the network is much more dense. Every robot can speak with many more robots, and so we have indeed a different network of interaction. And so we were a bit surprised that, okay, now there is a better alternative, and when the robots are more connected, they're not able to agree on, well, spread this information that there is the most urgent area. So normally an engineer will say to make information spread more, increase the network connection. Instead, no, what we found was the opposite, and we were a bit puzzled. And we realized that the reason for this was that what happened is that the robots, before advertising their opinion, needed to go and verify the site. They didn't trust the others, but because, as you remember, they advertise more often the sites that are of better quality. So to know this quality, they needed to verify the area and assess the quality and spread this information. So this is also what could happen in a population of in humans. Like I tell you, there is a fantastic restaurant here at the corner. Before you go to the office and tell everybody, that Italian guy told me there is, maybe you check yourself if it's good, and once you have checked it out, you spread yourself the word. So this time between you going and check and spreading the word, this robot spreading the word, made a delay that allowed the people believing the old opinion to revert their opinion back to say, no, shut up, still the frittata at the corner is still the best, and you never adapt to new information. So we found that in this case, when less connection were more, and three conditions were necessary. So there was a minority versus a majority, because all the group had the old belief, and only a minority discovered the new, better option. Then there was this slow positive feedback, so the fact that you need some time before you go and you speak yourself and you tell the others. And then an important point is that they were following quite simple rules. They are simple robots, so on people this might not happen, but on this robot following simple rules, and also on animals might happen this because they also follow simple rules. What happened is that the information was not able to spread in the group. Again, because here a robot could convince another one, and this might take a while, and then convince the other. But here, as soon as you try to convince somebody and he will not spread the information immediately, this guy is connected with a large majority of blue old believers, and they will revert to back. So this, I say, doesn't happen to humans, but somehow if people start to follow really simple behavior, simple rules, maybe on Facebook or on Twitter, that can happen. Maybe they also end up in this inability to adapt to better information and remain stuck on old belief. So, I don't know if we have time for another example, or I should jump to the conclusion.
Please, yes.
Yes?
Binary.
Okay. So, I joined the naming game of the spam and junk example. That is, again, how to agree on a convention without a central leader. And again, we use our friend the Kilobot, that is the robot that we have for studying this opinion spreading. And this work is done in collaboration with Vito Triani from CNR of Rome and Andrea Baronchelli, who is in London. And here, I will explain you really briefly what is this naming game that has been developed by studies in sociology, studying people, how really the names, the conventions, spam and junk spread in a population, and we we reused the same model for the robot, and we discovered something interesting. So the model works in the following. There is a speaker and a listener, and each robot has a vocabulary, and they need to agree on something. For example, this undesired email. And they have 3 possible words in their vocabulary. And so if they have more than one word, they will select one at random. And if the listener doesn't know this word, will just adopt it, right? So this is not a successful interaction, but at least the listener learns something. So he will expand his vocabulary. In the other case, in which the speaker select a word that is meshed in the other vocabulary, then is a successful interaction, so they delete all the unnecessary words, and they keep a vocabulary with one word. So this is how, by repeating this interaction over a large population, we will have a consensus on one word. So we tested this on our on our group of robots, and here they didn't use word, but used the color. So each robot invented a new color, and they had really a large number of possible color by combining their combination of RGB, I think about 100 different colors. So when they didn't have any word, they invented a new one. Otherwise, they used the word from their vocabulary. And the robots that don't display a color is because they have a long vocabulary, so they are undecided. When they have the vocabulary with one word, one color, they only display the single color that they had. And they move in the environment. They have this interaction network only between in local proximity, and the network change over time. And so in all cases, the group, of course, reached an agreement. But what we found that was interesting by moving from the model that in sociology has been used with dots, as Theo showed before, to other type of dots, but with a physical body, was that here they needed a much smaller vocabulary. Why? Because they had physical interaction, so they couldn't easily go from here to down here and reach large neighborhood. But the network changed slowly. So at maximum, they were exposed to 2 words. So eventually, the robot needed really a minimal cognition. It was just sufficient for them having a very limited vocabulary that is all the other model or studies, analysis that has been done normally wasn't the case. So that was, again, a result of the social network. Here, the body limited the social network, and having a limited social network limited the need of having a long vocabulary to remember all the words of the people you met. So, I give you an overview of our research, and I hope you enjoy. Thanks for your attention.
So let me invite you over here at the corner. We will have what we usually had last time. So also a small debate section, and then the idea is, of course, that interaction with the audience, so that you can pose your doubts or your questions. I think you've been very kind. I would say that you started making this comparison with bees and ants. Consider them as a positive kind of example of competitive behavior. But I like to be use a less flattening one, because so it's very interesting that we see collective behavior appearing in animals and human alike, and I wonder if it works because of the similar social structure. So social structures. For instance, it may be appealing to compare ourselves to bees, but maybe if we see the reaction of a flock of sheep, we don't like to think ourselves as sheep, but still we see appearing these kind of collective behaviors. And is it related to the, say, structure itself of the society between the sheep and human and the bees, or there is something more, say, behind these, that's below these, and it's more fundamental?
Well, again, this what I've shown is really good, because sorry, I'll prepare better my indeed, there are parallels between the two systems, because often I refer to the fact that the models that we have seen, like the voter model or the cross inhibition, can represent sometimes the interaction that in social science has been used to describe the behavior of in a population. However, we, as Timoteo has shown, we always need to pay attention on the fact that all models are wrong, but some are useful. So, in this case, I think here we can learn and predict some dynamics that we will be observed if every individual follow these rules. And these are particularly good when we represent organisms that are simple, like the ants or the bees. When we go towards organisms that are more complicated, already you made the example of sheep or so on, they are quite more elaborate, quite more advanced advanced animals, and this one might follow these simple rules in a moment of panic, of an emergency, so when they follow more an instinctive behavior, and that might happen also in humans. So, for example, humans, when they are faced to a danger or an emergency, like here the alarms of the fires rings and we all want to run out very quickly, we will possibly follow more instinctive rule, and so leads us to a less complicated behavior in our brain. So in this case, I believe this very simple model will represent quite well the dynamic of the group. However, if we start to think of a decision that we hope everybody takes with a bit more of thinking, like political decision, in this case, this simple model may be a very rough abstraction. They could still give us some indication, for example, the presence of this stubborn, what they would cause on the system, but we can't really, of course, have the power of predict the really rational and complex behavior. So I think they could really be good models to represent the system when we go on a lower level of panic, of emergency. This is my take on this.
Thank you. You have.
Oh yeah, I
something
agree
to
with
add, yeah?
Giovanni. There are some basic facts that are shared among the different groups or systems, and then once you want to think of any humans, but once you have time to reflect, to think of, then you have another solution. But otherwise, if you are in front of some urgent decision, we are as animals, so we interact quite quickly.
Okay. Thank you.
And I say urgent decision, but sometimes this very simple behavior we can observe even if you have your brain switched off in front of the phone screen. Sometimes we follow this herd behavior or so on again because we don't think too much about it. So having the ability of thinking elevates us to more sophisticated behavior. Otherwise, I think we end up very close to the animal.
Countering a bias that is.
Yeah, for example, countering the bias that we have.
Okay, that's very interesting, and was also quite interesting to see the different models. I guess there are many more, and I don't know them all. But my mind, and you put it in your presentation very subtle. It was like with the Democrats and Republican symbol, and I would say, well, one of the things from your point of view, in your analysis, what would be, for instance, a good representative of a good representation from the model point of view of what would be the role of, I'd say, political propaganda, not only in a dictatorship, but also in a democratic environment. So like how, I don't know if any of these two would apply or something else would apply, and how.
Yeah, I think again there are two levels. One is the virtual one, so where the network is a social network or Facebook or Twitter, so where you can reach people very far from you, so you can have a huge number of connections. And the other one is the physical one, the world where we live. Then in a day you can have, I don't know, 10 different connections, not more than that. So this gives you a different scale of time, but also different results, as Giovanni showed. In the first case, the one of Twitter or Facebook, then you have this fact that information spread very, very fast. What is interesting or dangerous is that fake news spread faster than the true news. And this is because of several stuff. First of all, they are bots, so automatic retweeter of something, but also we humans are more prone to pay attention, as Giovanni said, without thinking too much, to this fake news that is some kind of special, and then you retweet without thinking too much, and this creates a bubble effect where you have a cascade of person almost connect among them, but then they emphasize the increase, the importance of the relevance of the information. So that's why in the recent election, in the let's say 5 years or 10 years, there are more and more political persons that work on Twitter, on Facebook. It's not just because it's cheaper than normal propaganda, because they can reach with just one click 1,000 or 10,000 persons, and they can. I don't know if they can really push toward the direction, but there are not just one person that does a tweet, but a person that do the tweet for him or for her, and then this increases even more the probability to spread some information. So yeah, I think that this can be put in this framework, and there are results of studies of election, normally in the US, because we have a lot of data from the US about the user of tweet, that they, each part speak only with their own part. It's difficult to make the interaction across the two parties, and so this is the effect of propaganda that increases more and more just a simple fake news or real news spread definition.
Yeah, I agree that unfortunately it's possible to, not control the entire population, but manipulate a bit the opinions. Probably not of everybody, because we are not all the same. So there is people that is more vulnerable and more easily subjected to be steered, their opinion can be changed more easily, and unfortunately by monitoring the behavior of on the social network, this automatic bot that you mentioned might be able to target these people and steer their opinion, having a few number of these stubborn might really steer or at least change the opinion of this undecided or this vulnerable group enough to make a winning majority at the election or at the case that they are trying to win.
Okay, and going back, and of course, if you have a question, please raise your hand, and I will give you the word. But I have a list, so. But going back, for instance, again to the voter model, it was kind of interesting to see that with the relatively small numbers of stubborn people, we can make the whole system undecided, and that was. At least for me, was a quite surprising result. I guess is well known in the literature. And my question is, as in really voting scenario, where a lot of people tend to vote because their family vote that kind of party. So in that family, we vote that party. That I could qualify them as the stubborn one. Nothing wrong with that, but this is, I would say, what the model would call them. And indeed, the kind of interaction, we never go, or rarely go to undecided, but we have the kind of voter model interaction. Is then this related to what we find in human society when we find a party that is winning 51% against 49%? Is that really what we are seeing, or?
I think in part yes, it is related to that, and however I think in the human society is even more complex, because another thing that might happen is that I mentioned really briefly is this selective interaction. Somehow if I am from the left wing, I will not or interact with the right wing or interact really rarely with them, and this vice versa is also true. So what happens is that there will the population will form the so-called echo chamber, that you can hear always your own voice, or the group hear again and again its own voice, and the information gets reinforced and reinforced. And so it's an interlink between the dynamics of the network, that links get stronger and stronger with people that believe the same, and weaker with people that believe differently, and the fact of having this selective attention on searching for opinion that reinforce your idea. However, again, the model that we have sometimes are more simple than the reality. So our model cannot really predict the outcome of every election, otherwise, of course. But we can have an idea. If this type of segregation happens, then these are the probable long-term dynamics that we will see in the society and so on. Then the difficulty is that the people are likely or unlikely much more complex than this simple model we create. And so, as Timoteo explained, then the model needs to be refined with new data. We improve the model and so on and so on. The difficult part for us is that even if we have very simple rules, then the dynamics of the population are hard and counterintuitive to predict. So as we have seen, we change one direction of the arrow and two completely different behavior emerge in the group. And so you can imagine that we start to have an heterogeneous population, so each individual is different. And they follow very complicated rules, psychological rules. The model gets out of tractability, and we don't know what will happen.
Okay, thank you. So with respect to this point, actually, specifically, so we had, so we always talk engineering and science in general, like about simple modeling. So we try to make it as simple, but not simpler than that. Just that it's representative of our reality, or the reality we want to study. But yeah, I think that's a very interesting let's say question for the person that are not used to this kind of environment, of scientific environment, like how having such a simple model for the agent, for the reality, does bound the results then only to let's say simple cases, or does it really represent reality? Is able to represent the complex reality that we have around us, or is bound to fail? It's just not something that can be applied in real life.
No, I think this is really a new science that was born, say, 20, 30 years ago, the science of complex system, for which Giorgio Parisi got the Nobel Prize last year. So it's not a small science, it's a large science. And the idea is really that you have a lot of simple agents, in this case robots, bees and so on, but you can think also of molecules, if you are interested in biology or chemistry, that interact in a simple way each other, but the nectar structure, the number that they have, how they are spread in the space, these make the new emergent law that you cannot predict a priori. So if you look at the simple molecule of water, is one atom of oxygen and two of hydrogen, that's all. But then you don't see that there is ice, gases, and so on. That is an emergent property of the milliard of number of molecules of water that are together. So this is just a simple example, but there are many examples in physics where the whole is more the parts. So it's really the idea of complex system that, I repeat, got the Nobel Prize last year. So, yeah.
So something relevant.
Yeah, much relevant, yeah.
Is question from you.
I have a question about the modeling. How do you, in this case, compare the model results with data? How do you validate these results? It's not
In the case of the animals, for example, of the bees?
Or the robots, of your robots.
So, I'll reply by parts. So, in the case of the animals, of course, they observe it, and what the models that I've shown are all based on observation, and they observed how they interact with each other and how opinions spread, and they put them into the condition of making a decision between two nests of different quality, and they see that they select the best one, or when they are equal quality they split and they rejoin later the ants but not the bees. And for the robots, well, here the problem is a bit reversed, because here we don't, like with the animals, we need a model that explains the reality, and because we are not changing the behavior of the bees. But instead, for the robots, we design the model, we could modify the model or select which model we like the most, because we decided the rules of the robot to then have the desired outcome. However, the problem of my field, that is this collective robotics, is that you decide the rule of each individual robot, but you would like the group to do something, right? You would like the group to select the best path or divide into group, but then you cannot write the code of the group. You write the code of each individual. So that's why we often don't go directly in coding the rule, because then it's expensive running the experiment, setting up the robot. We make a mathematical model. We try to predict if this mathematical model will lead to the good collective behavior of the robots. When we are almost sure, we test on the robots, then sometimes doesn't work, so we go back, as Timoteo said, on the model. We miss this type of interaction. This dynamics was very relevant for the robot. For example, in the case of the large range of interaction that Salah came back with the problem, at the beginning we thought our model was perfect. Then we realized that was this important component of time that you take to advertise the opinion, to say that the good restaurant is indeed good. And this wasn't in the initial model. We didn't think it was relevant. Then was a key factor that we couldn't expect, and then we of course included when we learned was a key.
If I can add to this point, this is just exactly the complex systems. So from the single rule that you give to one kilobot, you cannot predict if the swarm goes to all black, all red or blue, or they go 50-50. That's really the difficulty. You cannot predict the whole from a single rule. You have to make an analysis or experiment.
I have two questions. Yes.
Yeah. No, don't you think that there's some confusion due to the fact that you define the model when you're talking of the answer of the beast, and then we agree it is model. But then when you're talking of the robot, this becomes a controller. It's no longer a model. And so you're not modeling the robot. You are using a model from some natural system as an example, and you control the robot, and then you observe what happens.
Indeed. But then sometimes before even running the robot experiment, because it's expensive and so on, I use the mathematical model to see if all the robots follow the rules that are inspired by the answer, the bees, will the population converge to a decision or the other?
Also in that case, it's not a model, it's control.
I think it's a terminology.
But I think on the same way, you can also control the bees. Imagine you act on the genome of the bees to avoid that the bees does the H-shape dance. Then it will pass, say, you will remove the link, the feedback link. So in this way, you are controlling the way the bees behave.
Yeah, so that is control.
Yeah, so there is okay, you can choose the word control for the robot, a model for the bees, but you can also act on the bees by controlling. So I think you can also change the model of the robot, no?
No, because in the case of the bees, you have a system, a natural system, something that exists. You can only collect data and try to be the model to explain the data, to forecast the behavior of the bees. In the case of the robot, you are giving the robot the control.
You give him an algorithm. But for example, in the analysis we have seen, without even writing the algorithm, I take a description of what the robot will do and how they will change their opinion without knowing that they need to send a message, change their state. But it's a description, so a model, in my opinion. I describe with mathematical equation how they will change their opinion, how the algorithm will act on the population, and then the mathematical description or model predicts before, so saves me a bit of risk of running things and trial and error in this controller, try and error. That's it.
I don't agree, but we can discuss it.
Yes, we can discuss this later, but thank you for the question. We have time for one last question.
Like two,
Yours,
I think.
yes. Two more?
Yeah,
Okay.
one of the back.
Can I start?
Yeah, go.
Yeah, sure,
yeah,
please
please.
go.
My question was about the target of the research. I understand that here the focus was really about how information is spread within a community based on these simple rules of the robots. But then you had, for example, a slide with the fire where the robots have a real task in order to, for example, identify the most important fire in order to fight against the fire. So is there also the target to find the most efficient way of creating a distributed intelligence, which might be even better than a central intelligence, which takes the information from every robot and then decides on its own what to do? And to compare these two approaches?
Yeah, of course, this is an alternative approach to the centralized superintelligence. So rather than having one mega computer controlling the behavior of every robot, like for example now we can see in YouTube, or maybe you have been lucky to see it live, this choreography of hundreds or thousands of drones creating 3D shape with lights in the sky. But here what happened is that the organizer built a lot of placed a lot of cameras, prepared a huge computer that processed the real-time position of every robot and tell every robot in real time where to go at every instant. So here, if the computer has a problem, a malfunctioning or anything that happens, I think, in an event in China, the robot will start falling on the ground and will be a disaster. So it's the so-called single point of failure. An alternative solution is that robots just look around their neighbor like birds do, and they try to keep a distance from each other and coordinate, and then this local rule of interaction will create this global figure. However, this is much more difficult because then from the control is simple. Let's say we have developed through century or decades the maths to master this. We don't have yet the knowledge and the math to control this complex system. So the complex system that he mentioned, Timoteo, because this emergent behavior will be the results of many local interaction. And so again, here I gave the example of the fire, but that is our long-term goal, our idea of how the system could coordinate. There is no central computer, the robots just coordinate with each other, but then we go on a much simpler system because again, the system, even if it's simple, as we say, is not so simple, it's complex. And so we are really trying to learn the basic, even if the things look simple, I are using the most advanced math known at the moment. So it's a hard job to figure out what the group will do.
Okay, thank you. And we have one last, I think we have a last question there.
Thank you. My question is just small, but it's a challenge. It's like if you have a given network of people and from external you want to push them to take a decision but without being seen, how technically do you do that?
You want to
Yeah,
take
so again, you have to make some a priori assumption on how people, so in your network, will react to some information. And then you can have models that tells you that you have to hit the hub, for instance. The node with the largest number of connection is the one that if you convince this person that is able to spread the information. But then, again, you should start from some a priori knowledge how the person in your network will react. Because if they are contrarians, it's not a good way to do. You have to go to the leaves, so the one that have less connection. So the simple question is, you can have a network where you have agents that are simplified as the one that we did. Then you can predict which is the node to control to push the network to one direction. So mathematically you can do it. From this to go to reality, I think the step is quite huge. So it's not so easy because there are too many parameters that maybe are not that are hidden. You don't know them.
Okay. Do you want to add something or no? Okay. Then yeah, I would say that we are already run over time. I don't know if you can have one more question. Yes, please.
General question: who in our society today do you think is best positioned to predict the outcome of complex systems?
Sorry, can you repeat? Who is the best position to predict?
Who is best positioned today in our society to predict the outcome of complex systems? Is it big tech? Is it hedge funds?
No, I don't think that complex system is a matter of big tech. I think it's a real science. Big tech, so Google, or if you think of Google or Twitter with Elon Musk, they are not interested in complex system. They are interested in making money from the network that they have, the data that they have. So they use big data. I agree, but not the science of complex system is a real science where you do experiment, you do model, and so I don't think neither Google nor Elon Musk are interested in models. Maybe they do analysis, but using computer, machine learning, but without being interested in which is behind this. And this is, I think, the role of we, the scientists. Maybe I'm naive, I don't know, but this is my point of view.
Yeah, I agree. They have access to huge amount of data, so they might build model and so on, but eventually it's not only about data, it's about the math and the theory to describe these systems. And as I tried to say, we are using some of the most advanced theories at the moment, and we are doing little step by little step. So I think the best people are academics that are trying to advance it. Of course, hopefully there will be some brilliant mind that will do a big jump, because we do little by little, then arise one Einstein and helps the field to progress really quickly. 2 years ago, we had the Nobel Prize on complex system because he managed to make a big leap forward in the 80s, I think, with some theories. And so the fact is there is not the answer, right? It's even if you have all the data of the world, it's the theory that miss, and that's what we are building together at the university.
Okay, thank you. So I think this is a bit closure and the difference between the science that you're doing and then the exploitation of the results, but this is for the future, I think. So thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you very much to all of you, and I take the chance to invite you to our next meeting. Do you remember the date precisely?
Precisely, no.
It's on our website, and it's going to be the 4th. We have a final one also in June, so if you're interested, every time there's a different topic, different scientist. So this time was more math, the first time was more robotics, last time was more about energy and combustion, so it's ongoing. So please check it out and come back. Thank you very much.
Thank you again.